Born conjoined, sharing a liver and a kidney, twins Lyra and Zara faced a life-or-death surgery that could save them or take them both. But from the razor's edge between life and death, an unexplainable miracle would rewrite the destiny of the entire Heron family. If you want to know how love, courage, and a twist of fate turn tragedy into hope, hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and keep watching for the full story. I can't do this, Ilara. I can't lose them both. Caius's voice cracked as he slammed his fists on the kitchen table, the sound reverberating through the small room. His eyes, red-rimmed from lack of sleep, were filled with a desperation that Ilara had never seen before. She stood across from him, her own hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the counter. The twins, Lyra and Zara, just 3 months old, were upstairs, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing downstairs. Their tiny bodies, conjoined at the abdomen, shared vital organs, the liver, kidneys, and Ilara couldn't shake the image from the ultrasound that first revealed their condition. 2 fragile lives intertwined, held together by a thread of hope, and now it was slipping through her fingers. "We don't have a choice, Caius," Ilara shot back, her voice shaking as tears welled up in her eyes. "If we don't do this surgery, they're both going to die." "Don't you understand that?" The doctors had been clear. The girls wouldn't survive without a separation surgery. It was their only chance. Caius turned away from her, running a hand through his disheveled hair. He was holding back tears, Ilara could tell. He'd been trying to be strong for so long, but the cracks were showing now. He exhaled sharply, his back still to her. "And what if the surgery kills them? Have you thought about that? What if—" He paused, his voice breaking. "What if we lose them both, Ilara?" Ilara's chest tightened, and she could feel the weight of his words press down on her, but she refused to back down. "They're not going to die, Caius. We have to believe in that. We have to believe that the doctors can do this. If we don't give them this chance, then we're just giving up on them. And I can't do that. I won't." Her voice dropped to a whisper as tears finally spilled over her cheeks. "I won't give up on our girls." Caius spun around, his own tears falling freely now. "You think I'm giving up?" His voice was sharp, edged with the pain of weeks of sleepless nights and endless fear. "You think I want this? I've been praying every day that we find some way out of this, some miracle. But I can't just put my faith in doctors, Ilara. I can't watch them go through that pain. What if something happens to them on that table? How am I supposed to live with that?" The image of their tiny girls lying helpless in the hospital haunted Ilara as well. The thought of them in pain, their small bodies cut open, and the delicate work of separating their shared organs was too much to bear. But she couldn't let that fear control them. They were running out of time. Without the surgery, the doctor said their liver would fail within months, and their kidneys might not last long after that. "We've run out of miracles, Caius," Ilara whispered, her voice cracking. "This surgery is all we have left." For a moment, there was only the sound of their quiet sobs, 2 broken parents in a moment of shared grief and helplessness. The decision hanging between them felt like a chasm. One wrong move, and everything would collapse. Caius slumped into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. "I don't want to lose them, Ilara," he whispered, his voice muffled by his hands. "I don't want to lose you." Ilara crossed the room slowly, sinking into the chair beside him. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his. "I know," she whispered, "but we can't live in fear. We have to give them a chance, Caius. They deserve that." Caius lifted his head, his tear-streaked face showing every ounce of his fear and love for their daughters. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I don't know how to make this decision." "We'll do it together," Ilara said softly. "We'll face this together, whatever happens. But I need you to trust me. I need you to believe that we're doing the right thing." Kayase stared at her for a long moment, the war in his heart evident on his face. Finally, with a slow nod, he whispered, "Okay, we'll do it. For them." Ilara exhaled, a mixture of relief and fear coursing through her. This was just the beginning. The real battle hadn't even started yet, but they had made the first step. Together. The baby monitor crackled to life, a soft cry echoing from upstairs. Ilara and Caius both froze, listening as one of the twins, Zara, Ilara guessed, stirred in her crib. Caius wiped his face, standing slowly. "I'll get her," he murmured, his voice raw but steady now. Ilara watched him walk up the stairs, her heart heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. The surgery was scheduled in just a few days, and every time she thought about it, her stomach twisted in knots. She wanted to believe that everything would be okay, that their girls would survive and thrive, but the fear gnawed at her constantly. As Caius disappeared into the nursery, Ilara leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a brief moment. She pictured the girls, tiny, fragile, but full of life. She had to hold on to that image. She had to believe that this surgery would save them. But in the quiet moments, when the world was still, the doubt crept in like a shadow. What if this was the wrong decision? What if they couldn't make it through? A soft cry from the monitor pulled her back to reality. There was no room for doubt now. Ilara wiped the last of her tears and stood. They had a long road ahead, but they would face it, one step at a time, one heartbeat at a time, together. The surgery day arrived like a wave crashing on the shore, inevitable, deafening, and too fast. The drive to the hospital had been silent, the car heavy with unspoken fears. Caius's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched so tightly Ilara thought it might snap. Neither of them dared to break the silence. The weight of the day pressed down on them, suffocating every attempt at normalcy. How could they talk about the weather or weekend plans when their daughters' lives hung in the balance? As they walked into the hospital, Ilara's hand brushed against Caius's. He took it, squeezing it gently, as if trying to reassure her, or himself, that everything would be okay. But the truth hung between them like a ghost they couldn't shake. They were entering a battlefield, and they had no idea if they'd make it out intact. The waiting room felt sterile and cold. Nurses bustled around, murmuring quietly to one another, oblivious to the storm raging in Ilara's chest. The ticking of the wall clock seemed louder than usual, each second dragging on like an eternity. "Ilara, Caius," Dr. Myers appeared, her expression calm but grave. "We're ready." Ilara could only nod. Her throat was too tight to speak, and she could feel Caius's grip tighten around her hand. Dr. Myers gave them a reassuring smile, but even that couldn't ease the dread gnawing at Ilara's heart. She watched as their daughters, tiny and fragile, were wheeled into the operating room. Lyra and Zara had no idea what was coming. They lay side by side in their shared crib, unaware of the magnitude of the decision that had been made for them. Hours passed. The weight was unbearable, every minute an agonizing crawl. Ilara sat in the same chair, her foot tapping uncontrollably, her hands twisting a tissue until it was shredded into pieces. Caius paced the small room, his steps frantic and uneven. The clicking of his shoes on the tile floor was the only sound, besides Ilara's shallow breathing. They've been in there too long. Caius muttered, running a hand through his hair for what must have been the 100th time. Caius. We knew this was going to take time, Ilara whispered, her voice barely audible. But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her. The surgery was supposed to take hours, but each passing second felt like it stretched into days. Then it happened. The door to the waiting room swung open abruptly, and a nurse rushed in, her face tight with urgency. "Mr. and Mrs. Heron," she said quickly, her words clipped. "Dr. Myers needs to speak with you both right away. There's been a complication." Ilara's blood ran cold. She felt Caius stiffen beside her. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all she could manage was a weak nod. They followed the nurse down a hallway that felt impossibly long, every step a fresh wave of nausea. Dr. Myers was waiting for them outside the operating room, her face etched with concern. "Zara's heart rate spiked unexpectedly," she began, her voice steady but urgent. "We had to act fast. She's stable now, but it was close." Ilara's legs buckled and she gripped the wall for support. Caius stood rigid, his fists clenched at his sides. "What do you mean it was close?" he demanded, his voice sharp and filled with fear. Dr. Myers took a breath. "We nearly lost her, but we managed to stabilize her in time. The surgery is still ongoing, but I wanted to inform you as soon as possible." The world tilted for Ilara, her worst nightmare inches away from becoming reality. Zara. Her sweet, tiny Zara. The thought of losing her made Ilara's breath catch in her throat. "They're fighters," Dr. Myers said softly, her voice gentle but firm. "They're both fighting hard. We're going to do everything we can." As the doctor disappeared back into the operating room, Ilara collapsed into a chair. Caius stood by the window, staring out into nothing. The silence between them was thick with terror, regret, and 1,000 unspoken fears. Ilara wanted to reach out to him, to say something that would make this easier, but she didn't know how. How could she comfort him when she was barely holding herself together? The hours dragged on, each one feeling longer than the last. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, Dr. Myers reappeared. This time her expression was more guarded, but there was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "They're out of surgery," she said, her voice calm but exhausted. "We've successfully separated them." Ilara's breath hitched. "Are they okay?" she whispered, barely able to form the words. Dr. Myers hesitated for a split second, and Ilara's heart sank. "They've both survived the surgery," the doctor said. "But there are challenges ahead. Each of your daughters now has only one kidney and, due to the shared anatomy, each has only one arm and one leg." She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. "They'll need extensive rehabilitation, but they've been given a new chance at life." Ilara's knees buckled, and Caius was there instantly, catching her before she fell. She clung to him, tears streaming down her face. "They're alive," Caius whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "They're alive, Ilara. That's what matters." The relief was overwhelming, yet laced with the weight of the challenges ahead. They had prayed for a miracle, and they had been granted one, but at a cost. Ilara squeezed Caius's hand, her heart a whirlwind of gratitude, grief, and exhaustion. Later that night, Ilara and Caius stood side by side in the recovery room, gazing at their daughters. Lyra and Zara, now separated, lay in 2 tiny beds, each attached to machines that beeped steadily. Their bodies were smaller now, incomplete, but they were alive. "They're so strong," Ilara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We'll help them through this. We have to." Caius nodded, his eyes never leaving the girls. "We will," he said softly. "We'll give them everything we've got." But there was something unsaid between them. While Lyra was beginning to stir, blinking groggily under the hospital lights, Zara remained still. Too still. The machines around her beeped rhythmically, but there was no movement, no flutter of her fingers, no rise of her tiny chest outside of the machines doing the work for her. "She's in a coma," Dr. Myers explained, stepping into the room. "Zara's body endured more stress than we anticipated. She may remain unconscious for days or even weeks. We're monitoring her closely, but right now, we just have to wait." Ilara's heart shattered all over again. Wait. How were they supposed to wait? Every second felt like agony, and now they were being told that Zara might never wake up. Caius stiffened beside her, his face hardening. This was a mistake," he muttered, his voice low but bitter. Ilara whipped her head toward him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "I mean, look at her, Ilara," he said louder now. "She's lying there, barely hanging on, and Lyra's awake, but look at what we've done to her. One arm, one leg. You said this was our only option, but was it really? Or did we just rush into this?" Ilara blinked, stunned by his words. Her own fear twisted into something sharper, a mix of anger and despair. "You think I wanted this? You think I made this decision lightly? They were going to die, Caius. This was their only chance. I was trying to save them." "But at what cost?" Caius shot back. "We might have lost Zara anyway. What if she never wakes up?" Ilara's tears flowed freely now, but she couldn't stop them. "Don't you dare blame me for this," she said, her voice trembling. "I did what any mother would do. I fought for them, and if you can't see that, then maybe you never understood." The room fell into a heavy silence. Caius looked away, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his guilt and fear. Ilara sank into the chair beside Zara's bed, feeling the full weight of the uncertainty that now hung over their family. Zara lay there, her future as uncertain as ever, and the tension between Ilara and Caius grew, casting a dark shadow over the fragile hope they had clung to for so long. The days following the surgery blurred together, a haze of waiting rooms, quiet tears, and sleepless nights. Caius spent most of his time pacing, his footsteps filling the sterile air, while Ilara hovered over their daughters, waiting for any sign of change. She held Lyra's hand as much as she could, her heart heavy with the knowledge that while one of her girls was waking up to a new life, the other was still lost in the limbo of unconsciousness. Lyra had always been the stronger one. Even as a baby, she fought harder, cried louder, and clung to life with a fierceness Ilara admired. Now separated and facing a reality where she had only one arm and one leg, Lyra blinked up at her mother with curious eyes, as if trying to make sense of it all. "You're doing so well, sweet girl," Ilara whispered, brushing her fingers gently through Lyra's hair. "You're so strong." Lyra's lips quivered slightly as though she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Ilara wished more than anything that she could crawl inside her daughter's mind, soothe her fears, and reassure her that everything would be okay, even if it didn't feel that way now. But the truth hung heavily between them. Lyra's life had changed forever. There would be years of therapy, adjustments, and challenges that neither of them had anticipated. And Zara. Zara still hadn't opened her eyes. On the fourth day after the surgery, Ilara sat beside Zara's bed, her eyes fixed on the slow rise and fall of her daughter's chest. The machines around her beeped steadily, a constant reminder that Zara was still here, still fighting, even if she hadn't returned to them yet. "Come back to me, baby," Ilara whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. She hadn't slept more than a few hours in days, but she didn't care. Sleep could wait. Everything could wait, except for this. Then, just as the room seemed to close in around her, a small sound, a shift, a soft moan, cut through the air. Ilara's heart leapt into her throat. Zara's fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttering ever so slightly. Ilara shot to her feet, gripping the side of the bed as if it might disappear beneath her hands. "Zara?" Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. "Zara? Baby? Can you hear me?" Slowly, achingly slowly, Zara's eyes flickered open. They were hazy, unfocused, but they were open. Ilara felt the weight of 1,000 fears lift off her chest in an instant, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to hope. "Oh my God," Ilara whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Zara, you're back." The joy, however, was fleeting. As the days passed, it became clear that Zara's body had endured far more trauma than they'd initially realized. Her liver, once shared with her sister, wasn't functioning as it should. Tests showed signs of distress, and the doctors delivered the news Ilara had been dreading. "Zara's liver isn't going to recover on its own," Dr. Myers explained one afternoon, her voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "We've done everything we can to support it, but she's going to need a liver transplant. If we don't act soon, her condition could worsen rapidly." Ilara's mind went numb, her body rigid as she absorbed the news. It wasn't enough that Zara had just barely survived the separation surgery. Now, they were faced with another life-or-death decision, another impossible choice that no mother should have to make. "I'll do it," Ilara said, her voice low but firm. Caius, who had been silent through most of the doctor's explanation, turned to her sharply. "Ilara, no, you can't." "I can," Ilara interrupted, her eyes fixed on Dr. Myers. "I'm her mother. I'll give her whatever she needs. If that means part of my liver, then so be it." Dr. Myers nodded, her expression unreadable. "It's a difficult surgery, Ilara. There are risks involved, not just for Zara, but for you as well. You need to be sure." Ilara glanced over at Zara, who lay so small and fragile in her hospital bed, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. The decision wasn't difficult. It was the only thing she could do. "I'm sure," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. Caius stood abruptly, frustration etched into every line of his face. "Ilara, you don't have to do this. There are other options. There are donor lists." "We don't have time to wait for a donor," Ilara said softly, her eyes still on Zara. "She needs me now." The tension between them, already strained from days of uncertainty, broke again. Caius's face darkened with frustration, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he turned away, hands buried in his hair, as if trying to contain the emotions bubbling beneath the surface. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. Ilara spent that night sitting by Zara's side, holding her hand and whispering promises of hope and strength. The quiet room was filled with the hum of machines, a sound Ilara had grown all too familiar with. "You're going to be okay," Ilara murmured, brushing a stray curl from Zara's forehead. "We're going to get through this. You're so strong, sweetheart. So strong." The next day came too quickly. Ilara was prepped for surgery, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. She kissed Zara's forehead before being wheeled away, her heart heavy but full of love for the tiny girl she was determined to save. The transplant surgery took hours, each minute dragging on with agonizing slowness. Caius waited alone in the hospital, pacing the floors, his mind consumed with every worst-case scenario. When Dr. Myers finally emerged from the operating room, her expression was grave, but there was a sliver of hope in her eyes. "Both surgeries went well," she said, her voice steady. "It's going to be a long recovery for both Ilara and Zara, but we've given Zara a fighting chance." Kayuse let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He closed his eyes, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over him. The hospital room was too quiet. Ilara lay resting in the bed beside Caius, still pale from her own surgery, a patchwork of IVs and monitors surrounding her. Caius rubbed his tired eyes, glancing over at the second bed where Zara lay, so small and fragile, her chest rising and falling with the help of the machines keeping her alive. "Lord, please," he whispered under his breath, though the room was empty. Caius hadn't prayed in years, not since his father's death. Faith had felt distant, almost irrelevant. But now he clung to it like a lifeline. "Please, let her be okay." The next few days passed in slow motion, a blur of nurses coming in and out, adjusting tubes, checking vitals. Ilara was recovering, though slowly. Her body ached from the surgery, but every time she glanced over at Zara, her heart ached more. "She's doing okay," Ilara said one afternoon, her voice hopeful but weary. She winced as she shifted in bed, her hand instinctively resting on her side, where the surgery had left its mark. "Right?" Caius looked at her, not quite sure how to answer. He wanted to tell her yes, that everything was going to be okay, that Zara would bounce back just like Lyra had. But the truth was, Zara's condition remained fragile, and the doctors were careful not to give too much hope. "She's hanging in there," he said softly. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't a comfort either. As the days turned into weeks, Zara's strength seemed to grow, little by little. Her liver was functioning, and the doctors had given them a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. Ilara and Caius clung to that hope like a lifeline, watching as Zara slowly returned to them. There were even moments where her eyes fluttered open, her small fingers curling around Ilara's as if she was trying to hold on with every ounce of strength she had left. "She's a fighter," Dr. Myers would often remind them, offering a warm, reassuring smile, just like her parents. But it wasn't long before the weight of their joy was tempered by a creeping fear. The complications came without warning, a high fever, a sudden drop in liver function. Caius sat in the hospital chapel that night, the light from the candles casting flickering shadows on the walls. He hadn't wanted to leave Zara's side, but something had pulled him here. The chapel was empty, except for an old wooden cross hanging at the far end. He stared at it, feeling the silence press in around him. He wasn't sure if he believed in miracles, but he needed one now. He folded his hands, feeling awkward, unsure of what to say. His father had prayed like this often, his deep voice rumbling through the house, filled with conviction. But Caius had never shared that same confidence. Now, all he had was a whisper. "Please. God, I don't know if you're listening or if you even care. But if you do, if you're there, please don't take her from us." His voice cracked, the vulnerability in his plea catching him off guard. "She's just a baby. Please." The chapel remained still, the candles flickering softly, but there was no sign, no answer. Just the quiet. Caius sat there, alone with his fear. The next morning, Zara took a turn for the worse. Her liver began to fail, the new tissue unable to keep up with the demands of her small body. Dr. Myers met them in the hallway, her face grave. "Ilara, Caius," she began, her voice careful, steady. "Zara's condition has deteriorated rapidly. We're doing everything we can, but..." I need you both to prepare yourselves. Her body may not be able to recover." Ilara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No. No. She was doing better. She was. Her voice faltered, and Caius reached for her, but she pulled away, tears brimming in her eyes. "We're not giving up," Dr. Myers continued, "but I want to be honest with you. We are reaching the limits of what we can do." Ilara and Caius were silent as they followed Dr. Myers into the room where Zara lay. The machines continued their steady beeping, but the rhythm now felt like a countdown. Ilara's legs buckled slightly, and Caius caught her, guiding her to the chair beside Zara's bed. Zara's small hand was cold as Ilara took it, her thumb brushing lightly over the delicate skin. "My baby," she whispered, the words almost too painful to speak. Lyra, who had been recovering well in the adjoining room, was brought in at Ilara's request. The doctors helped settle her beside Zara, their small bodies now separated but still bound together in ways that only they would ever understand. Lyra, now able to sense the gravity of the moment, began to cry. Her tears came slowly at first, then faster, her small chest heaving with the effort. She reached for Zara's hand, her fingers brushing over her sister's motionless palm. Ilara's breath caught in her throat, watching the scene unfold, helpless. "Please, God," Ilara whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, don't take her from us. Not like this." Caius stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, gripping her tightly as if he were holding on to the very last thread of hope. The room was thick with the weight of impending loss, the kind of sorrow that leaves a permanent mark. For a few minutes, nothing happened, just the sound of Lyra's soft sobs and the quiet hum of the machines. But then, as if responding to Lyra's desperate touch, Zara's fingers twitched. It was slight, so small that Ilara thought she had imagined it. But then it happened again. And this time, Lyra's sobs quieted as she watched. "Caius." Ilara's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Did you see that?" Caius leaned closer, his heart pounding. He watched as Zara's tiny fingers curled just enough to grip Lyra's hand. It was faint, weak, but it was real. "She's—" Ilara couldn't finish the sentence, her emotions overwhelming her. Dr. Myers rushed back into the room, her eyes scanning the monitors, the machines, Zara's still form. And then, with the kind of quiet awe that only comes from witnessing something beyond medical explanation, she said softly, "She's responding." The room seemed to hold its breath, as if even the air around them knew something miraculous was unfolding. Slowly, Zara's eyes fluttered open. Ilara let out a sob of relief, her hand flying to her mouth as tears poured down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, over and over. "Thank you, God." Caius fell to his knees beside the bed, his body shaking with emotion. He had prayed for a miracle, and now, here it was. He didn't understand it, didn't need to. All he knew was that somehow, against all odds, Zara was coming back to them. The doctors stood in stunned silence, unable to explain what had just happened. But for Ilara and Caius, no explanation was needed. This was the moment they had prayed for, the miracle they had begged for in the darkest hours. Zara's grip on Lyra's hand grew stronger, and as Ilara leaned down to kiss her daughter's forehead, she whispered through her tears, "You're our miracle, baby. You're our miracle." The Heron household was quiet, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm. The weeks since Zara's miraculous recovery had been filled with a delicate mix of gratitude and exhaustion. It wasn't the loud, overwhelming relief Ilara had imagined, but rather a quieter, more fragile hope. Their daughters were alive, but the journey ahead felt daunting. Zara and Lyra, now 6 months old, had survived the impossible. Ilara and Caius often found themselves gazing at the twins, who had endured more in their few months of life than most people do in a lifetime. The girls were separated now, no longer conjoined, but their lives were irrevocably intertwined. The days passed slowly in a blur of hospital visits, doctor's appointments, and therapy sessions. Lyra, the stronger of the two, was recovering steadily, her small body adjusting well to the change. Zara, however, was still fragile, her tiny frame weakened by the surgeries and the complications that had nearly taken her from them. At 9 months old, the girls began physical therapy. The therapists were patient, moving slowly with the twins, helping their small bodies learn new ways to function. Lyra, with one arm and one leg, adapted more quickly than Zara. She showed a quiet determination that left Ilara in awe. Despite the obstacles, Lyra pushed forward, balancing on her tiny prosthetic leg with the help of her physical therapist. "Look at her," Ilara whispered to Caius one afternoon as they watched Lyra attempt her first steps on the prosthetic. Her steps were wobbly, her movements tentative, but there was something fierce in her determination. "She's not even a year old, and she's already stronger than I'll ever be." Caius nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "She's a fighter," he murmured, unable to take his eyes off their daughter. Zara's recovery was slower. At 10 months, she was still struggling to regain her strength. She had suffered more during the surgeries, and her small body had to work twice as hard to keep up. Ilara spent many sleepless nights by Zara's crib, watching her chest rise and fall, still haunted by the memory of nearly losing her. But Zara wasn't giving up either. Slowly, with the same quiet resilience as her sister, she began to show signs of progress. The therapists worked with her on balance and coordination, helping her learn to move with crutches. It was a painstakingly slow process, each session filled with tears and frustration. By the time the twins turned 1 year old, the physical therapy sessions had become a part of their routine. Lyra had adjusted to using her prosthetic leg, and though she still stumbled and fell, her determination remained unwavering. Zara, too, was progressing, though at her own pace. The therapists had turned the sessions into games, rewarding every small success with smiles and encouragement. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult session, Ilara sat with Zara in her lap, watching as Lyra practiced walking across the room. Zara's eyes followed her sister, a mixture of awe and frustration on her face. "Mommy," Zara said softly, her voice tinged with sadness. "Why can't I do that?" Ilara's heart ached at the question. She had feared this moment, the realization that Zara's recovery was taking longer than Lyra's. She wanted to give Zara an answer that would make everything better, but the truth was, there were no easy answers. "You will, Zara," Ilara said gently, brushing her daughter's hair back. "You're getting stronger every day, and one day you'll walk just like Lyra." Zara nodded, though her small face remained doubtful. Ilara kissed the top of her head, feeling the weight of the future pressing down on her. There were so many unknowns, so many challenges yet to come. As the months passed, Ilara and Caius settled into a new normal. The girls, now 18 months old, were growing more independent, learning to navigate the world on their own. Lyra, with her boundless energy, often pushed the limits of what she could do, while Zara took things slower, moving carefully with her crutches. The family's evenings became a time of quiet togetherness. After the therapists left and the house grew still, Ilara would sit with the girls, telling them stories or singing lullabies as they drifted off to sleep. Remember, Ilara would whisper to the girls as they snuggled into their beds, you're never alone. You have each other, and you have us, no matter what. And they did. The bond between Lyra and Zara was something that even the surgeries couldn't sever. They were no longer physically connected, but their hearts were still bound together by the shared fight they had endured. As Lyra and Zara continued to grow, so did the Heron family. The quiet moments of peace they had fought so hard for were slowly being filled with the sounds of new beginnings. Bennett and Justin, the twins' younger brothers, had come into the world when Lyra and Zara were 2 years old. Their arrival was unexpected, a surprise Ilara and Caius hadn't planned for, but one that added an unexpected layer of joy to their lives. The pregnancy had been a time of reflection for Ilara. There had been nights when she lay awake, her hand resting on her growing belly, wondering how she would manage to care for 2 young girls with special needs while raising 2 newborns. But as with every challenge they had faced, Ilara and Caius met this new chapter with determination, leaning on each other as they had learned to do. Bennett and Justin were born healthy, both strong and full of life, and their presence filled the Heron home with a new kind of energy. The house, once quiet and heavy with worry, now echoed with the sounds of baby laughter, the coos and cries of new life. The 2 boys quickly became the light of Lyra and Zara's world. At first, Ilara had worried that the girls might feel left behind. Their parents' attention split between caring for them and the new babies. But instead, Lyra and Zara embraced their new roles as big sisters with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone. By the time Lyra and Zara turned 3 years old, their personalities had begun to shine in new ways. They were no longer just the miracle twins. They were Lyra and Zara, 2 separate little girls with distinct dreams and talents. Lyra, always the more energetic and adventurous of the 2, had discovered a love for drawing. Despite having only one hand, she spent hours with crayons and markers, filling the pages of her sketchbook with colorful worlds of her own making. Her drawings were filled with vibrant landscapes and fantastical creatures, a reflection of her boundless imagination. "Look, Mummy!" Lyra would exclaim, holding up a new drawing proudly. "I made a picture of us!" Ilara's heart swelled with pride as she looked at Lyra's drawing. A family portrait, complete with stick figures of herself, Caius, Zara, and their younger brothers, Bennett and Justin. Zara, meanwhile, had found her passion in music. Despite her physical limitations, she was determined to learn the piano, a task that had seemed impossible at first. Ilara had worried that Zara's frustration would outweigh her love for the instrument, but she had been wrong. Zara's perseverance was stronger than anyone had anticipated. At 3.5 years old, Zara sat at the piano, her small fingers moving carefully across the keys. The music was simple, but to Ilara, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. "You're amazing, Zara," Ilara whispered, tears filling her eyes as she watched her daughter play. "Absolutely amazing." Zara looked up, her face glowing with pride. "I'm getting better, right, Mummy?" "Better every day, sweetheart," Ilara replied softly. And she was. Both girls were getting better, stronger, and more confident with each passing day. They had been given a second chance at life, and they were making the most of it, each in their own way. Bennett and Justin, just a few years younger than their sisters, adored them. They would often sit beside Zara as she played the piano, or ask Lyra to draw them pictures of superheroes. The bond between the 4 siblings was unbreakable, forged in the fires of everything they had been through together. Ilara watched her children grow with a mixture of awe and gratitude. The challenges were still there. Lyra and Zara would always face difficulties that other children wouldn't. But they were thriving, each in their own way, and that was more than she had ever dared to hope for. The first day of school had always felt like a milestone for Ilara. It was a mix of pride and nervousness, watching her girls step into the world with their backpacks, hand in hand, while she stood at the edge of the driveway, waving them off. This year, Lyra and Zara were 7 years old, and they were heading into second grade together, as they always had. But this year felt different. The excitement that usually buzzed around the house in the days leading up to school was quieter. Lyra had become more reserved, her energy dulled. Zara, too, had started to hesitate before they left for school, her usual chatter silenced as the car neared the entrance of the building. Ilara noticed. She always noticed. It wasn't until a few weeks in that the truth came out. Ilara had been picking the girls up from school, and as she buckled Zara into her seat, she caught a glimpse of Lyra's downcast eyes in the rear-view mirror. "Lyra?" she asked softly. "Everything okay?" Lyra paused, her small hands fiddling with the strap of her seatbelt. "Some kids, they say stuff." "Say stuff?" Ilara's heart tightened. "What do you mean?" Zara, sitting beside her, looked out the window, avoiding eye contact. "They call us names, Mom, about the way we walk, and because we're different." Ilara felt her heart drop. She had known that this day might come, despite all the progress Lyra and Zara had made, the surgeries, the therapies. It didn't change the fact that, to the world, they looked different. Lyra's prosthetic leg and Zara's crutches had become part of who they were, but not everyone saw them as the brave, strong girls Ilara knew them to be. "What do they say?" Ilara asked, her voice catching as she turned to face them. Lyra shrugged, trying to act like it didn't bother her, but Ilara saw the way her lip quivered. They call us names. They laugh when we try to run. And this boy in my class, Ben, he told me I'm slow because I only have one leg." The words stung Ilara as though she had been slapped. How could anyone, especially a child, say such things? Ilara's voice shook as she tried to offer comfort. "Sweetheart, you are the bravest, strongest girl I know. Those kids don't understand what you've been through. They don't know how strong you really are." Lyra didn't reply, and Zara remained silent beside her. Ilara's heart ached. No amount of reassurance could take away the sting of cruelty. It wasn't long before the news reached Bennett and Justin, the twins' younger brothers, now 5 years old and in kindergarten. They were small for their age, but they had a fierce loyalty to their sisters. They adored Lyra and Zara, idolized them really. And when they overheard their sisters talking one night about the teasing, it set something off in them. "We'll protect you," Bennett had declared one night at dinner, his small hands balled into fists, his face red with indignation. "Yeah," Justin added, his voice determined. "Nobody messes with our sisters." Ilara had smiled softly, but worry gnawed at her. The boys were young, too young to understand the complexities of bullying. And though their hearts were in the right place, Ilara feared what might happen if they tried to confront the bullies on their own. A few days later, the inevitable happened. It was during recess, when Lyra and Zara were playing on the edge of the playground, away from the noisy crowd of their classmates. They preferred the quieter corners, where they could practice their balance or sit under the trees and talk. But that day, the teasing escalated. Ben, the boy who had already taunted Lyra, walked up to them with 2 other kids trailing behind him. "Hey, slowpoke," he sneered, pointing at Lyra's leg. "Bet you can't even run across the field without falling." Lyra's face flushed and she tried to ignore him, but Ben wasn't finished. "You're like a pirate with that peg leg," he continued, his friends laughing behind him. And Zara's always limping with those sticks. Do you two even know how to walk?" Zara's eyes filled with tears, her small hands gripping her crutches tightly. Lyra stood up, her fists clenched. But before she could say anything, a shout rang out from across the playground. "Leave them alone!" Bennett and Justin came barreling across the field, their little legs pumping furiously as they closed the distance between them and the older boys. They skidded to a stop in front of their sisters, their small chests heaving as they glared at Ben. "You don't talk to our sisters like that," Bennett said, his voice shaking with anger. "Yeah," Justin added, stepping up beside his brother. "You better stop, or we'll make you." Ben laughed, unimpressed by the two smaller boys standing up to him. "What are you going to do, huh? You're just little kids." But Bennett and Justin weren't backing down. "We're not afraid of you," Bennett shot back, his fists still clenched at his sides. "You mess with our sisters. You mess with us." In a split second, Ben lunged at Bennett, shoving him backward. Bennett stumbled, but before he could hit the ground, Justin was on Ben, tackling him with all the strength his small body could muster. The other kids shouted in surprise as the scuffle began, and it wasn't long before a teacher rushed over, pulling them apart. Ilara received the call from the school later that afternoon, and by the time she arrived, Bennett and Justin were sitting in the principal's office, looking small and defiant in their chairs. Lyra and Zara stood beside them, both silent, their faces pale with worry. The principal explained what had happened, but as she scolded the boys for getting involved in a fight, Ilara's heart swelled with pride. Yes, they had acted rashly. Yes, they were too young to understand the consequences of fighting. But Ilara couldn't help but feel proud of the way her boys had stood up for their sisters. They had defended them, not with anger, but with love. On the drive home, the car was quiet again, but this time there was a warmth that hadn't been there before. Lyra leaned over and took Zara's hand, and Bennett and Justin sat in the back, their small faces still set in determination. That night, as Ilara tucked them into bed, she kissed each of them on the forehead, lingering for a moment with her heart full. "You're a good team," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Always remember that. You're a team." And as the house grew still, Ilara allowed herself to believe that despite the cruelty of the world, the bond between her children was stronger than anything life could throw at them. They had each other, and that was more than enough. Lyra sat by her desk, the faint hum of her computer and the gentle scratching of her pencil filling the room. Her designs, lines and colors dancing across the screen, had become her world. At 23, she had grown into a talented graphic designer, her artistic vision sharper with each passing year. Her love for drawing, born in childhood as a way to escape and express her emotions, had blossomed into a career. She was building a name for herself in the design industry, one project at a time. Across town, Zara's fingers danced across the keys of her piano. The music filled the room, delicate and full of emotion, as it always was. At 23, her life had become a symphony of challenges and triumphs, and through it all, she had never let go of her love for music. Her ability to create such beauty, despite only having one hand, had stunned everyone around her. But Zara didn't think of it that way. To her, the piano was where she felt whole, where the complexities of life faded, leaving only the purity of sound. Though their lives had taken different paths, Lyra and Zara remained inseparable in spirit. Their bond, forged through shared struggle and survival, had grown even stronger with time. Their physical scars from childhood, the result of surgeries and therapies, remained, but they had learned to wear those scars as badges of honor, symbols of the battles they had fought and won. The Heron family, still as close-knit as ever, was the foundation that had allowed Lyra and Zara to thrive. Ilara and Caius had been their unwavering support through everything. The years of hospital visits and sleepless nights had tested their marriage and their strength, but they had emerged on the other side with a deeper understanding of love and resilience. Now Caius spent much of his time working with families who faced similar challenges. Parents with children born into impossible circumstances, unsure of where to turn. Caius's passion for advocacy grew naturally from his own experience. He remembered the hopelessness, the nights spent pacing hospital floors, the endless discussions with doctors about the slim odds of survival. But his daughters were living proof that hope was worth clinging to, even when the odds seemed stacked against you. He had turned that experience into a mission, offering hope and guidance to other families who needed it most. At a recent family gathering, Ilara watched with a quiet smile as her children laughed and shared stories. Bennett and Justin, now 20, had grown into strong, kind young men, always quick with a joke and a hug for their sisters. The family had grown in numbers and in spirit, their love for each other deepening with each passing year. As Ilara sat beside Caius, she leaned in and whispered, "Look at them." Caius nodded, pride shining in his eyes as he watched Lyra and Zara recount their latest accomplishments. "They've come so far." "They have," Ilara agreed, her heart full. "I didn't think we'd get here. Not after everything." Caius placed a gentle hand on her knee. "We made it because we never stopped believing in them." The love and resilience that had carried the Heron family through their darkest days were now the very things propelling Lyra and Zara forward into bright, hopeful futures. They had faced more in their young lives than most people ever would, yet they had emerged from it all stronger, more compassionate, and ready for whatever challenges life might throw their way. Lyra's career was taking off. She had recently landed a contract with a well-known design firm, her work praised for its creativity and depth. Zara, too, was making waves in the world of music, her performances growing in demand as her talent became more widely recognized. They were young, full of ambition, and above all, filled with a sense of gratitude for the life they had been given. As the evening drew to a close, the family gathered in the living room, laughter still lingering in the air. Zara moved to the piano, her fingers brushing the keys as everyone settled in. The soft melody filled the room, wrapping around each of them like a warm embrace. Lyra glanced at Zara, her heart swelling with pride. She knew they were both standing on the edge of something new, something exciting and unknown, but they were ready. They had faced the impossible and come out stronger for it. Whatever lay ahead, they would take it on together, just as they always had. As the final notes of Zara's song faded into the night, Ilara looked around the room, her family gathered around her. The future was wide open, full of possibilities and challenges. But with the love they shared, Ilara knew they could face anything. Lyra and Zara, with the unwavering support of their family, were ready to step into that future with confidence. And as they did, they carried with them the knowledge that love, hope, and perseverance could overcome even the greatest of obstacles. Their story was far from over, but whatever came next, it would be a story full of courage, resilience, and endless possibility. Wow, what a journey, right? Lyra and Zara's story truly touches the heart. It's a powerful reminder of how deep a parent's love can go and the lengths we'll go to for our children. Ilara and Caius's unwavering support for their daughters, even in the face of impossible odds, shows us just how resilient families can be when they stick together. And let's not forget the blessings of God's grace in their story. Zara's miraculous recovery wasn't just about medicine. It felt like a divine intervention, a reminder that sometimes when we have faith, incredible things can happen. What's really special here is the way this family held onto hope, no matter how hard things got. Through love, patience, and prayer, they overcame challenges that seemed too big to handle. It makes you think about your own family and what really matters. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever experienced something that felt like a miracle? Drop a comment below and let's chat. And don't forget to hit that like button if this story moved you as much as it did me. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed.